Alright, so the thematic connection between these two stories and the message that they were trying to convey to the reader that I thought was like the most seen throughout was the idea of enlightenment. And so with the idea of enlightenment, it's to share or impart in giving intellectual or spiritual light to and impart knowledge unto the person. And so within the allegory of a cave, it talks about how we as a people are in this constant trap of, you know, just being bound in chains in this sort of this cycle, or being sheltered in a cave where we can't really indulge in life's fullest little joys. But so there are those type of people who are just stuck and can't really escape, and then there are the few who are able to escape that continual cycle, or are essentially just able to free themselves from that cycle and see the light outside the cave. And so when they do leave the cave, they're able to experience life at its fullest, such as, you know, knowing the beauty of nature, seeing the sun, the moon, the stars, essentially the heavens and the earths all together. And so with that knowledge, they are enlightened by the realness of reality, and to essentially they learn more than what they would have had they stayed in the cave, where they would just have been chained up, hearing only echoes and seeing only shadows. So in that story, Plato then says it's an obligation for those who are enlightened to essentially share that knowledge with those who are still stuck in that cycle. And so even despite all the mocking, the trials, and all the tribulations that a person may occur when sharing that knowledge back to those people, whether they even deserve it or not, it is that amount of knowledge that cannot be hid for the enjoyment of one. That would be like a very selfish way of going about life. And so Plato had it so that knowledge must be shared to everyone for the gain of themselves along with the other people. And so in that quote, it talks about, it is the task of the enlightened not only to ascend to learning, to see the good, but to be willing to descend again to those prisoners and share their troubles and their honors, whether they are worth having or not. This they must do even with the prospect of death. They shall give of their help to one another, whether each class is able to help the community. And so, yeah, that was what I got from the allegory of the cave. And so, within the story of A Good Man is Hard to Find, just during the final stages of the story, where the key parts or the key interactions between the grandmother and between the misfit, and it's her experiences and interactions that she goes through when dealing with the misfit, as she goes through a change of heart essentially when she interacts with the misfit, I guess. And that change of heart, or learning more past beyond herself, is that idea of enlightenment. And so as her life is threatened and put on the line, she sees the light as such as people from the cave who are enlightened. And so just how Plato says that it was necessary for those enlightened to share that knowledge back with those who deserved it, that is what the grandmother essentially does, as she reaches out inward and by in action and physical, I guess in a physical sense, she reaches out to the misfit, where she then pays for the price of death essentially, because the misfit shoots her in the heart 3 times, which has its symbolicness of, you know, the Holy Trinity. And so even as Plato explained how they must do that even to the prospect of death, that's what happens. And, you know, when she does get shot in the heart 3 times, that's the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, which make up the Trinity, which in a sense, them, the 3 shots being able to hit her in the heart gives that symbolic meaning of, that she was able to have that change of heart where she did turn into a better person from whence she was before. So yeah. So in comparison between those 2 stories, at the beginning of the story for A Good Man is Hard to Find, the grandmother is essentially the role as the people in the cave who are in chains, bound, unable to progress in life, not learning anything or not really seeing anymore. So as the story continues though, when her time comes to interact with the misfit, that's when she essentially escapes those bonds and is able to see past more than herself and receive full knowledge of the light and pureness of what life is truly meant to be. And that is more of like the idea of truth and grace that she receives and when she wants to share that knowledge back with the misfit. And so, these, again, in comparison with these 2 stories, they both are very similar in the idea of enlightenment, but rather within the story of A Good Man is Hard to Find, it has a character, a misfit, which plays a vital role in displaying grace, and he is seen as the character as essentially a symbolic character as Jesus, who displays grace on the grandmother and shows her what the true meaning of life is and brings her to the light as another character. And so, in tying this with the real world and historical context, there are missionaries that are seen all throughout the world, and missionaries are usually come from all kinds of religions and faiths that they believe they've gone through the idea of enlightenment, where they've grown up all through their life, and once they reach that final stage or that final part in their life where they think they understand life and understand all the joys and pleasures that life truly has to offer, they want to share that knowledge with everyone around the world, or everyone in the world, even unto, life-threatening places such as the missionaries of Latter-day Saints who go out to like Africa or even the Middle East, who are constantly trying to display their true understanding of enlightenment, what they think to be true. And so, let's see. And so the truths that, both stories have are similar but different in a way, so within the story, the allegory of the cave, truth is more seen as being able to learn more and to gain a better knowledge and to see past beyond what people are having you seen. And within the story, A Good Man is Hard to Find, truth is essentially seen as essentially not being selfish, more compassionate, more understanding, and like reaching out to your fellow man. And so, like that, in reaching out to another man and helping out your fellow brethren, it ties in similarly with the story of Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, where the prisoners that are all very beat up, abused, and like tortured, and like they're all at that point where they could give up, but some of those few are able to go past that torture and all that pain, and they are essentially enlightened by life and start taking into account the real beauty of everything around them, such as noticing the sunrise or the sunset as one of the scenes in the book. So in like comparison with those 2 stories, in comparison to Man's Search for Meaning, those prisoners are enlightened and want to share that knowledge, and so that everyone may know that freedom and the taste of that. And so, just in conclusion, between these 2 stories, Good Man is Hard to Find and the allegory of a cave, the overall idea of, the overall theme or idea that, you know, once you are enlightened, it is your obligation or your duty to share that knowledge back with people is key or essential in life, I guess, and yeah, that's it.